Hi, my name is Anne McElhenney.
And I'm Fetal McAleer.
Welcome to the Anne and Fetal Scoop. It is.
Was I supposed to say something
You
like
were
that?
meant to maybe interrupt there, Phil. You see, I'm very conscious of the interrupting thing now.
Oh yeah, you're still being harassed by our fans.
I am. It's
On
very,
the
very-
interrupting. Some people even say I interrupt as well. Don't feel bad about it, Anne. But you should.
It's 55 weeks, by the way. 1 year and 3 weeks since the 2 weeks to flatten the curve lockdown. And we want to start today by telling you a story about. We got. By the way, thank you so much to everyone who's sending checks and who's donating online to My Son Hunter Biden campaign.
Yes.
Movie.
I mean, we're almost at. We're over 500. We're almost at 600,000 now.
So it's great, and obviously we're heading towards 700,000.
Yeah. And it's just the response has been amazing. Don't forget, we're making a movie about the Hunter Biden story, the Hunter Biden biopic. He has a book out, just came out yesterday. We're rapidly reading that.
Yes.
They wouldn't send us a review copy, strangely.
Shockingly.
Because we know the story better than anyone. We can point out the lies. We'll bring you more details on that next week. But we got a donation from a couple in Montana, and it was a strange total.
Yeah.
It looked strange. Normally some people give $2,000, $3,000, $30, $25. This was a strange total, and we couldn't work out what it was.
And we actually had a whole conversation about this weird amount because we were thinking, oh, maybe it's been converted from another currency. And then we get a message from Montana. And this is the message. Greetings from beautiful Montana. We are still
Where we
are still mostly free. Thank heavens. My husband and I are big fans of your podcast and are so grateful for having some true news to tune into on a weekly basis. With the last year of absolute insanity that the COVID crisis has spun the world into, the truth is elusive and the foundations of what we love about our country seem like a fading memory.
Yep.
So we are so appreciative of folks like you who are not afraid to get into the muck and bring light to the seemingly insidious direction of the media, politics, etc. I also wanted to point out that we recently gave you a very specific amount for your My Son Hunter project. We knew we wanted to help, but when we recently received our latest COVID stimulus payment via debit card, which infuriates us because, thankfully, we don't need it, and we see it only as the Biden-Harris administration trying to get Americans on the proverbial teeth of socialism.
Teeth.
What did I say?
Teeth.
And what did you say?
Teeth.
Okay.
Those are two different parts of the human body.
Moving on.
Teeth of socialism.
We felt the best way to spend every penny was to help expose the whole Hunter Biden fiasco. I only hope our payment goes through. It did. And didn't get cancelled for not supporting a leftist agenda. We think we are quite clever and gave ourselves a pat on the back for coming up with this. LOL. Here's what we give you.
Yes, thank you, and applause.
Again, thanks so much for all you do. Many blessings to you both. And if you need an escape from sunny California, you're welcome to a free stay at wherever in Montana.
And we're keeping this anonymous because we don't have their permission to use their names.
But we love you and we really appreciate you guys.
And next time we are in that place in Montana or anywhere near it.
Yes, we will come.
We will.
And by the way, not hard to get us to go to Montana, by the way. Beautiful, beautiful Montana. So we'll be in touch. Yes. Our people will talk to your people.
We used to have a great friend in Montana, Jessica.
Oh, we did have a great friend.
And
do you know where she's moved to? Alabama.
She met a man.
That's what happens.
Man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Jessica.
That's it. Okay, and later...
What else is in the show, Anne?
Later, we'll be talking all things Hunter with Peter Schweizer. In fact, Phelan will be talking all things Hunter.
A great author, filmmaker. He knows, he's forgotten more about Hunter Biden than most of us remembered. And... yes, the New York Times have a shocking report on hormones, but not the hormones. Some hormones are good and some apparently are not. Mm-hmm. There you go. And don't let anyone tell you that globalism, the idea of globalism, is a conspiracy theory. It's not, and it's been proven this week. And
Judicial Watch have released their latest batch of emails between buyers and sellers of baby parts.
They got them under the Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah, very, very disturbing stuff. And Easter, by the way, we've just passed by Easter and Phelan's birthday. Phelan's birthday weekend. We celebrated over a weekend. It's kind of like a festival, the Phelan McAleer birthday festival. Mm-hmm. And we also do have a look at what happened at Easter. Two very different approaches to how to deal with the police trying to stop people worshipping and celebrating Easter. And we're giving a shout out to the Canadians on this occasion that did very, very well. And in more very crazy, mad COVID news, we have these two story from Ireland, with a very specific story from Ireland about two women, which you will have to hang in for that because it's really great.
It's talking about the teeth of socialism.
There's something to do with teats, all right. We're not getting there. That's all right. Okay, fair enough. And then the last thing we have to bring you today is an incredibly magnificent recipe from the New York Times, which we've stolen from the New York Times, and it really proves the point that actually the New York Times is good for something. But first, we're going to go over to our famous interview with Peter Schweizer.
Yeah. So Peter, I'll introduce him in the interview. I did it earlier, just before we came on air. Peter is he, as I say, he's responsible for really exposing the Hillary Clinton corruption, really just laying it out in a way that forced the mainstream media to take it. So he's a brilliant journalist and a brilliant researcher. So let's go over and hear that interview now. Okay, I'm joined now by Peter Schweizer. It's a great pleasure to have him on. What can I say about Peter Schweizer? I've got it all written out here, but it's so long that it would almost take up the whole interview. I suppose Peter's best known for his book Clinton Cash, but I first encountered Peter really through Andrew Breitbart, a friend of both of ours, and certainly for me a mentor and an advisor and a humorist and many, many other things. And I'm sure we miss him every day. I would just love to know what he would think about the world today. He would have a lot to say about it. So I suppose you first came to prominence, really media prominence, with Breitbart, but also then you did the book about insider trading in Congress, which I think we can talk about this. I think there was people did not know that members of Congress could inside trade without any criminal penalties, and you exposed that and worked with CBS to expose that as well. But you're a historian. You've written about Ronald Reagan overthrowing communism. You in a weird way, Peter Schweizer also really exposed the Clinton corruption. For as long as I've been alive, there's been conversations and talk about Clinton corruption, but none of it ever really stuck until your book, in my opinion, Clinton Cash, the untold story of why foreign governments and businesses helped make Bill and Hillary rich. And I think that book came out in 2015, but the stink of that book never really left her up until election day. It just stuck to her, and it was unusual. We can talk about that maybe later as well. It was unusual because they were the Teflon couple up until then, and it didn't stick. And I'd like to talk about that as well. But the reason we have you here today is because in 2018 you published a very prescient book, Secret Empires: How the American Political Class Hides Corruption and Enriches Family and Friends. And basically, it was focusing on many American political families, but you did actually focus as well on Hunter Biden and the Ukraine and other activities. So as many people know, we're doing the Hunter Biden movie, and no better person to talk to. You were at this when everyone was looking the other way, you were looking that way. And I'd like to talk to you about that. So welcome to the show, Peter. Did I miss anything?
No, that's great. Thank you. Very, very kind introduction. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you again. Yeah, the introduction is all over the place, but that just shows in some ways the breadth of your experience and your bipartisanship as well in some respects. So to use a word that's popular at the moment. So let's start at the end first. Tell us about how you became interested in Hunter Biden and why you were looking there and no one else was looking there, and why it's important to look there.
Well, for me, it's an old statement in Washington, D.C. to follow the money, but I think it's absolutely true. So we ended up looking at the Bidens at Hunter Biden because the research team, we stumbled across these deals in China. And they just struck us as really odd. The fact that Hunter Biden, while his father was vice president, was over in China meeting with the highest ranking financial people you could. Mm-hmm. Chinese governments. And when you looked at Hunter Biden's background, there was just really no reason for him to be in that room other than the fact that his father was vice president.
Yeah.
So that's why we started poking around. And oftentimes, I think that's the best approach. It's to look at the money flows. It's to see where money is flowing. And, politicians have gotten very sophisticated about this. The old way was, you give them money and they'd put it in a shoebox and they'd hide it. And they're far more sophisticated now. What they do is what I call offshore their corruption. I'm not talking about offshore bank accounts.
Yep.
Could include that. I'm talking about the fact that, if you're a senator from the state of California and I want to bribe you and you want to take a bribe, the way to do it is not for me to give you the shoebox of cash. The way for me to do it is to find a family member, not your spouse, because you have to disclose assets, but maybe it's a son or maybe it's a niece or a nephew or whoever, and give them the payoff. That is corrupt. That is still bribery, but it's very, very hard to detect. And that's why a lot of people, including the Bidens in particular, do it that way.
Yeah, very good point. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you enriching the children of these politicians or the nephews or the nieces, and perhaps they give a kickback, like for example to the big guy. That's the new way of corruption. So you asked the question, why is this guy in the room, and what was the answer?
The answer was he was in the room because he was the son of the vice president, and that Joe Biden would become the point person on policy towards China. And, when you look at how red capitalism works in China, you understand why they would latch on and want to do deals with Hunter Biden's, because in China, the capitalist system is based on the princelings, the sons and daughters of the powerful Communist Party bosses. They are the quote unquote entrepreneurs that drive a fair amount of what goes on in China. So what we saw with the Bidens is really the Chinese princeling model brought to bear in the United States. But I think the other point to make is, this is not somehow that the Chinese imposed this on the Bidens. I mean, this is kind of the way the Bidens have done business for a long time. It didn't begin with China in 2011, 2012. It's not going to end there. It's going to continue. The Bidens have always had this model of enriching family members. They are the moons that flow around planet Joe Biden and his political power. And when he was a senator, his two brothers, his sister, his son, and his daughter all had deals that they benefited from that came courtesy of the fact that Joe Biden was a powerful senator and later vice president of the United States. So this was a corrupt marriage, as it were, between the Bidens and the Chinese. The main difference for the Bidens was it went global. Up to this point, most of the deals had been in the United States. Now the corrupt deals were global, and they happen to be with America's chief rival on the global stage, which is the People's Republic of China.
Yeah, actually, funny. This is something that people don't realize is that the Biden corruption goes way back. And I researching this for this movie, people are saying this is how the Bidens have behaved for 40 years. This is nothing new. Like they were well known in Delaware for paying for nothing, for enriching themselves. You may not know, Peter, but we have a cat that sometimes appears in our podcast, and he's just jumped up on my lap, as cats do when you're working from home. So if you see a set of ears popping up, it's not the Chinese. It's not a Chinese spy. It is, in fact, Top Cat. It's Top Cat. Okay, so
I love cats. That's
yes.
Great.
So we have said about Hunter Biden being, on the board of Burisma when he shouldn't have been. This Chinese deal with on an investment fund. We've also talked about the gem that he got, the gift from the Chinese businessman, the spending spree that Joe Biden's brother and him and another member of the family were given mysteriously by a Chinese businessman. It sounds like I'm making that up, right? It sounds like I'm kind of in a conspiracy theory. Now, there are conspiracy theories out there about Hunter Biden, but this is is factually true. I mean, tell me why I can say that it's factually true.
Well, first of all, the Bidens have not challenged any of the core claims that these deals went down. So the facts are very, very simple. Hunter Biden was put on the board of a government-financed, multi-billion-dollar private equity firm called Bohai Harvest, RST. He was given a board seat. He was given 10% equity in the company, and he literally brought nothing to the table. No capital, no experience, no relationships in the business world. Those are all facts. The Bidens have not disputed those. We know that he had a deal involving another entity called Rosemont Realty. This is a real estate company he was involved in. He literally got an unsolicited bid from a Chinese company called Gemini, which is linked to the People's Liberation Army Navy, their military units. That's a fact. They haven't disputed that. We know that he later had this deal with CEFC, the Chinese energy company, where they put millions of dollars into his pocket. Those are facts. And what you find with the Bidens is they never actually deal with the underlying commercial ties, because those are all confirmed. They're a matter of corporate record. They're a matter of Chinese sourcing, not anonymous sources, but
Yes.
black and white. So what the Bidens end up doing is claiming that other people are making it a conspiracy theory, but they're not. My simple question has always been, and the Bidens have never answered, is what services was Hunter Biden providing to the Chinese? They don't run charities. So if they're going to juice him in on all these deals where he's literally bringing nothing to the table, what is he being paid for? That's a very simple, basic question to answer. They have not answered it beginning in 2018 when I first raised these questions. So it only brings you back to the point of he was being paid because he was the son of the vice president, and the vice president was point policy on China, and his rhetoric is so incredibly soft on Beijing. It's very easy to see that they were looking for this as a way of influencing Joe Biden, and they were probably successful in it.
Yeah. I mean, rich Americans are known for their philanthropy, actually. They're kind of unique in the world in that regard. I would suggest, maybe you could correct me, this rich Chinese people are not known for their philanthropy. And believe me, funny enough, I would go with the Chinese model if I had made lots of money. I'd find it difficult to be philanthropic. It's an amazing American thing, and it's something they should be praised for. But the Chinese have not adopted the philanthropic model. Whatever money, the millions, the tens of millions that they gave Hunter Biden, that was not a philanthropic gesture. That was in return for services or in return for something. And that's the thing, as you say, on paper. But Hunter Biden gave an interview to the New Yorker in 2019 where he admitted also getting a gem from a Chinese businessman, getting money for a spending spree from a Chinese businessman. I mean, that interview alone should have been enough to keep the American newspaper industry in work for 6 months. But it just faded away. It just went away. And, how shocking was the lack of follow-up by the American media to these black and white documents and to the emails that were in the laptop that have never been challenged and that are easily verifiable or, by the way, easily debunked. That's an important thing. Perhaps people who are not journalists, right, would think, well, how can you prove that that's, how can anyone prove that email is genuine? The email is CC'd to four or five people. You phone them up and say, were you involved in this email chain? If you're not, where were you? Where was your computer? There are ways of debunking this. You could debunk it. A couple of reporters could debunk it in 2 days.
Yeah. I mean, the point you make, which is critically important, is they never even tried. They never even tried one way or the other. And here's the bottom line on the emails. Our team has gone through the Hunter Biden emails. We have the benefit of having other sets of data that we know to be true. So, for example, one of Hunter Biden's business partners is Bevan Cooney, who's in jail. Bevan Cooney gave us access, not to print it out to emails, but to his actual Gmail account, meaning we have his username and his password. We went into his Gmail account. And you know what we found? We found that every email in the Hunter Biden collection that has Bevan Cooney on the email is replicated completely in the Gmail collection that Bevan Cooney had. It's timestamped. So, there's no way you can get Google to change the timestamp a 2014 email.
No.
did, however, is we look at other things that we know are factually correct. We know, for example, that through the Freedom of Information Act, the Hunter Biden Secret Service travel logs were released of all of his trips overseas from 2009 through late 2014. When you lay those up against the Hunter Biden emails, anytime the Hunter Biden email makes reference to we're taking a trip or we took a trip or we're on a trip, it matches completely with the Secret Service travel logs. So, this is not rocket science.
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is forensic work.
Yeah.
And the media had no interest in doing any of this. And it's really a stunning and sad situation that we are in. Because they not only ignored the story, some of them bragged about the fact that they ignored the story. There's a columnist at the New York Times who ran a piece saying that, the gatekeepers, as he called them, meaning the New York Times and other publications, Ben Smith was the columnist, where he brags that the gatekeepers didn't follow Schweizer's lead like they did with Clinton Cash back in 2016. Never even entertaining the thought that this information could actually be accurate. That was not the point. The point is to control the narrative. And when we're in a situation where news organizations are more interested in controlling the narrative than actually informing their readers of what's going on in a straightforward informational way, we have a huge media problem in this country.
Yeah. Oh, it's massive. I mean, and also, that what you published was true, because can you imagine the journalistic awards that they could get if they debunked you, if they got you in errors and mistakes? I mean, they love catching people in minor errors or a tweet from 7 years ago that's vaguely racy or racist, and this is, they love this. This is apparently what journalism is now, is to find something that somebody said 7 years ago, or to find some mistake that a journalist has made, and so therefore debunk everything they've ever written. But they didn't do that, and that tells you they did. I know as a journalist, they didn't do that because they didn't like the answer they would get when they would try and debunk it. And I think, you talked about ignoring it. I think it went to a certain higher level of suppression. I mean, the word went out to journalists: if you cover this story, you will not be welcome in polite journalistic society. They were basically threatening people on Twitter. And then, of course, Twitter and Facebook did actively suppress it. So they were working together and each were giving each other credibility. Twitter is suppressing it, so we shouldn't cover it because it's obviously not true. Now, Twitter has since admitted that was a mistake, which is kind of weird. They had 17 days to decide, and I could have told them in 17 minutes that's a mistake, because if the story was so inaccurate. I mean, we all know about journalistic swarms, and they're sometimes they're a joy to watch. And now, I loved the journalistic swarms in the UK. A crime story would break it. You'd have dozens of journalists, like literally finding people that the killer went to school with and the victim went to school with, and their first boyfriend, their second boyfriend, their 10th boyfriend, all this. It's just, and the information just comes in thick and fast. I mean, I remember there was, sorry to go off on a tangent, but there was a case where a guy went out on a paddle boat into the water and disappeared, and his wife got the insurance money, and it turns out it was an insurance thing. He didn't tell his own children that he was alive. His wife, he was living in the attic and not telling his children. They went off to Panama to live and didn't tell the children that he was still alive. He was revealed then somehow a few years later, and the cops were in England trying to piece together this fraud case, and the journalists were out there, and basically the cops had to admit, like, the investigation is moving so slowly that the journalists are doing more police investigative work. They were combing websites. They were meeting people in Panama who had lunch with them, dinner with them. He ran a business. So journalists can actually outpace actual police investigations sometimes, because they don't need warrants. They don't need to go to extradition. They can just get on a plane and go and stick a microphone and walk on someone's property. Or they can be told to get off. So that's a very long-winded way of saying to people out there, a journalistic swarm is an amazing thing. And there was no journalistic swarm around these very, very serious allegations, because the journalists knew that the answers would not have been pretty and could have been fatal to Joe Biden's presidential aspirations.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think what's happened is, the Biden story has shifted. I mean, you talk about this sort of criminal case. I mean, the Biden story has shifted, which also ought to be a red flag to the media. I mean, when I first published this stuff in 2018, January 2018, they dismissed it as a political attack job. Then when more reporting came out, they changed and said, well, Hunter Biden might have had these foreign deals, but Joe Biden didn't know anything about them. Then when more evidence came out and showed that Joe Biden did in fact know about the deals, that he in fact did meet some of Hunter Biden's business partners, the story shifted again to that Joe Biden never personally benefited from these deals. Now that story has been challenged and there's new evidence out, they're shifting the story again. That ought to be a telltale sign, and you would think that most journalists who profess to want to, what's the phrase, speak truth to power, this is now the most powerful man in the world. You would think that that sort of chain of events of shifting stories would lead them to curiosity, but it doesn't. And I've seen the shift myself. I mean, in the New York Times, they actually approached me and asked me to write a piece on this issue of corruption. And I used in my piece the example of Hunter Biden's deals with China and those involving Republicans who had deals in China. And that went through the New York Times fact-checking process. They didn't flag any of it because it was all checked out by the New York Times. And yet their own reporters, of whom I know, and some of them were good, it was very clear that the brass at the New York Times and other publications did not want to cover this story because they felt they had a higher purpose, and the higher purpose was to tip the scales in the election in Joe Biden's favor. And that is not the role of what a newspaper should be doing if they're professing all of the news that's fit to print. This is certainly news that's fit to print for the New York Times.
I mean, I just want to point out for our listeners that, your book doesn't particularly focus on Hunter Biden's, let's say, lifestyle choices. Our movie will, to some extent, because actually, from a journalistic point of view, I mean, we say this often, we're not making this movie to focus on Hunter Biden's addictions because being Irish, we have to hold our hands up and say, we're guilty, Your Honor. So you have to say Hunter Biden was uniquely unqualified for many of the roles he was given. But when you add in his addiction issues and his chaotic lifestyle, then he was triply disqualified from these roles. So, I mean, our movie will be focusing on that, because it's fun and it's entertaining and it's nice to look at and all that, or interesting to look at. But also, it says what was the reason this guy was getting, and I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say millions and tens of millions of dollars handed to him, and then when it was handed him, where was it going?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, if you look at the Hunter Biden emails and the Bevan Cooney emails, there's so many instances where, there are meetings or there's work to be done. And, Hunter Biden is either absent or in one case, they were having some high level meetings. And Hunter Biden says, well, what's the first meeting I absolutely have to go to? The point is this was not a guy who was, setting up the financial infrastructure of these companies. He was on for the ride because of his name, and the substance abuse ties into that. And I have to say, I'm a little bit mystified because part of the defense that Team Biden is offering is kind of the, poor Hunter defense, which is, well, he may have cut some corners ethically in these financial deals, but, he had the substance abuse issues. And so they're almost using, sadly, I would say, the substance abuse issues, which are real and tragic, kind of crutch. The problem is it highlights to me exactly the point that we're discussing, which is the substance abuse is another reason why you would not be qualified for these jobs. I mean, if you're, again, setting up a multinational financial private equity firm in China involving the Chinese government, where you're doing sensitive technology deals, you really want a guy on your board who has substance abuse issues, who may talk about them, who may be subject to blackmail. Of course not. So it's relevant from that standpoint. For me, it's a tragedy. He's faced those things, but it's relevant from the standpoint of highlighting again the sort of bizarre and deeply troubling nature of the fact that he is being selected for these deals by Chinese government-linked entities for which he's not qualified and for which he would propose a major risk because of his substance abuse issues.
Yeah. We talked to a Hollywood director here in this is probably outside your area of expertise. We talked to a Hollywood director here. He said, I'd love to be part of this, but I want to work again. And he says, well, tell us, what do you think of the story? And he goes, you know what? At the end of the day, Hunter Biden hates his father. He says, this is King Lear almost. This because, he left that laptop. He wanted, some way in his mind, he wanted the laptop to be found. He wanted to jeopardize his father's chances. Bo was always the chosen son, the golden son. Hunter was kind of the Prince Harry of it all. And he resented that. And children know who their parents' favorite child is. It's hurtful, but people know who's the favorite and who's not. So that's another reason why, as you say, why Hunter was uniquely disqualified, except because of the name and the influence and the power he could bring. So I think that is everything, Peter. Tell people where they can get your book.
You can get my book, Secret Empires or Profiles in Corruption, at Amazon.com or at bookstores everywhere.
Are you on Twitter?
Yes, I'm on Twitter at Peter Schweizer. You can look at the research that we do at cronyism.com.
Very good. Nice website name, actually. Nice website name. And you can get more information and you can donate to the Hunter Biden movie at mysonhunter.com. Thanks, Peter Schweizer. It's going to be, the reason we're making the movie is to popularize, and I don't mean that in a vulgar way, but to do the media's job for them. And this story was suppressed by big Hollywood, big media, and big tech, to quote Andrew Breitbart. We need to fight back against it and get this story to millions of people. So thanks very much, Peter, and we appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Great to be with you.
Bye. So, I want to interview Peter again. I want to. This story is going to run and run, and when we get through the Hunter book, I'm going to go back to Peter and ask him about that, because Peter, I've been doing a lot of research. You've been doing a lot of research because of the movie we're making. Don't forget, you can donate to the movie at mysonhunter.com. That's mysonhunter.com. So please do go there, and we'll be back. We'll definitely be following up on this story. What else is on the show today, Anne? Well,
this is an incredible story from the New York Times that proves that the New York Times can inadvertently end up doing journalism that they didn't even realize they were doing.
So I spotted this, they did this article about really the disturbing trend of parents giving their children growth hormones when all the basically that's wrong with kids is that they're smaller than the rest of the kids.
At that moment.
And these are children at 5, at 6, at 7, at 8. And the New York Times is going like, you don't know what's wrong with your kids. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just small. It could be genetic. They could have a growth spurt as they get older. In other words, they could change. They could change how they think and how their body thinks and how their body works. But they point out, it's like they're seeking a medical solution for a perceived problem, right? And
does that sound like something else?
Parents should also know, and this is like serious injections. I think this is an injection a day for years. They should also know, as Jane Brody in the New York Times writes, they should also know, however, that new research has linked growth hormone treatment to serious adverse health effects years later. And they point out that in Sweden, where data like this is collected, pediatric endocrinologists from the Karolinska University Hospital reported that among 3,408 patients who were treated with the growth hormone as children and adolescents and followed up 25 years later, the risk of developing a cardiovascular event like a heart attack or stroke was 2/3 higher for men and twice as high for women.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so serious problems about using growth hormones on children. But the New York Times does not see any problem with using puberty blockers on prepubescent children. I mean, what effect?
Hormones bad for one purpose in prepubescent children. Hormones not apparently bad.
In fact, they're courageous. So New York Times, if hormones on children are bad, then they're bad. And, you shouldn't be using them anyway, because children at 7 do not, as the London Appeal Court found recently, children at 7 cannot give consent to serious operations or serious hormone treatments that are irreversible. So you should not be giving them anyway. But New York Times, if you're going to say giving someone a growth hormone, which by the way is not, I'm not a medical expert, but I imagine a growth hormone isn't as much, isn't as powerful as a hormone that blocks your puberty. Maybe it is, but anyway, if one growth hormone is bad for children at 7, they're all bad.
It's kind of amazing as well that they write this story, that this big story in the New York Times, and they fail to kind of make the obvious connection between these two stories that are about the very same thing.
Yes.
But anyway, in a way, I think it's kind of good, because it's kind of like they inadvertently acknowledge the fact that messing around with hormones in prepubescent children is not a good thing,
Yes.
and they just didn't even realize they were ended up doing some journalism,
That's
right. On the way to doing another story that was, like they just complete. I don't know. Is it intentional or is it idiotic? Are they that stupid? By the way,
they are.
That they wrote that story and didn't realize what they were saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, tell us about globalism, Phil.
Well, you often hear people describe the idea of globalism as conspiracy theory, QAnon, and it's a big word, but then Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, on Monday, they're back on Monday. She has just put out a thing to called on countries around the world to set a global minimum corporate tax, right? In other words,
buzz off.
Yeah,
sorry,
but also countries like Ireland, who've become rich largely because of their low corporate tax that has attracted outside investment. They're trying to rob them of that competitive advantage, and I suppose Democrats hate competition. They hate competitive advantages because it means that they can't control it. They hate freedom to move countries. They hate freedom to choose your own path, and they love globalism and they love global standards. And so, when someone raises their eyebrows when you say globalism, point out that to them.
Yes.
So
I saw this story. This is incredible. So Judicial Watch have obtained more records. So they did, the Judicial Watch do these wonderful FOIA requests where they ask for using the Freedom of Information Act, they ask for records between government agencies. And in this case, they procured the records of the FDA purchases of fetal tissue for humanized mice. I slowed myself down on saying that because
By the way, I just want to say fetal tissue is a misleading. It's not fetal tissue. It's arms, it's legs,
yes.
It's hearts, it's livers. It's not like a little, bit of skin. These are human parts.
Yeah. So basically, Judicial Watch. So they've just recently, had another dump of these records from the Food and Drug Administration, showing that the agency spent tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars to buy human fetal tissue, as Phelim says, arms and legs and brains, from California-based Advanced Bioscience Resource, ABR. The tissue was used in creating humanized mice to test biologic drug products. So I think what's really amazing about this, and the reason I wanted to include it, is just the way that they speak to each other, the way that these people speak to each other about this. It's amazing and the correspondence that we're looking at is correspondence between the Food and Drug Administration Research Veterinary Medical Officer Dr. Christina Howard and Perrin Larton, who is from ABR Procurement.
And it's like, for example, they said one set of tissue,
thymus and
liver, approx twice monthly,
it was to be shipped fresh, shipped on wet ice. And then here's some of the ways they talk to each other. So this is the emails, Just wanted to follow up with you regarding the tissue deliveries. We have 3 batches of mice that still need to be humanized. So please keep us on the schedule every week until we manage to receive 3 sets of tissue. Another email. Our package was x-rayed and the tissue, oh, this one's amazing. Our package was x-rayed and the tissue could not be used. Lawton responded, damn, they were wonderful tissues. Yeah. I procured them. I'm training in new tech in Minneapolis and I told her how important it is to put on the package, do not x-ray stickers. Of course, if you have an imbecile at FedEx side, but then, now it's a moot point, Howard replied, yes, we were absolutely heartbroken. They were beautiful tissues. Beautiful. And to lose them like that was awful.
Beautiful baby parts.
Beautiful baby parts. Another one. This week I'm working with a doctor who induces fetal demise. Read for that.
Kills.
By the way, kills. By the way, fetal demise, inducing fetal demise is the phrase that we heard before film, right? Who used to say that?
Kermit Gosnell.
Kermit Gosnell talked about inducing fetal demise. But here they're talking about this week I'm working with a doctor who induces fetal demise at 20 weeks. 20 weeks.
5 months.
5 months. The other doctors who staff this clinic won't induce fetal demise until 22 weeks. That's 5.5 months to you and me. And of course, this week we had 4 21-week cases that all had been injected with digoxin on Wednesday. So the tissue is unusable. I'll have you on next week and prioritize your request. Go on. Yes, I know what you're going to say.
How do they induce fetal demise without using digoxin? I mean, that was the whole thing that we saw in the Kermit Gosnell trial was, oh no, we're not like Kermit Gosnell because we use digoxin first. The baby is dead when we dismember it. Are they saying that they don't stop the heartbeat?
I am wondering what that means. I think that's really amazing, and I was very aware of that when I highlighted that because I thought that's odd. So they're making it clear, the people who are buying the baby parts from the FDA, that they're making it clear that they don't want them to be x-rayed, they don't want them to use digoxin.
But also, this is interesting. This is them changing their clinical procedures for money.
For money, yep, to make the money, yep. And I'm just going to continue on with some of the others. It's so frustrating. We're also working with a new doctor in one of the busiest clinics. Not a good combo. The tissue is awful. So in one of the busy clinics where they're not taking so much care to give them the tissue intact, the baby's intact.
Well, they're not changing their procedures for the money.
And then there's an amazing section at the very end. Great news. We haven't whatever. By the way, great news. We have mice that need to be made. By the way, last week's tissue was amazing. And in September 2017, email.
By the way, this is 2017. This is when Donald Trump was president.
Yeah, I know. We did get tissue for you today. It's to be addressed for you for pickup at the station. Howard responded, yeah, happy to hear the tissue is available. By any chance, do you know how many weeks it is? Lawton responded, the tissue is 15 weeks. That is almost 4 months. Yeah. Due to the Rosh Hashanah holiday, the clinics were closed yesterday, so no real large tissue today. And then the other one responds, oh, I didn't realize that the holiday would interfere with clinic operations. Thanks again for getting the tissue. Lawton responded, oh, and he responded back, we didn't either, but many of the doctors are Jewish. And so this has gone back and forth and back and forth. It's really disturbing. Yeah. And it basically ends up, here's the thing that I think is very interesting, because these documents have obviously gone to the courts. And the courts have basically said there is a reason to question whether the transactions involved violate federal law, barring the sales of fetal organ. The decision notes that ABR sold second trimesters, livers and thymi, which is the brains, right, for hundreds of dollars apiece, the same for brains, eyes and lungs. After tacking on fees for services like shipping and cleaning, ABR could collect over $2,000 on a single fetus it purchased from Planned Parenthood for $60. The federal government participated in this potentially illicit trade for years. That's the court.
Yeah.
That's the court saying that. We need to get away from that because that is such an awful story. But I just thought, and any of you, by the way, can just go on the Judicial Watch website and read more of the details and more of those emails, which are super, super disturbing and good for Judicial Watch for unearthing them, because people need to know. And you read that stuff and it's like, I mean, you read that stuff and you think people are writing to each other like this. They're talking like this to each other. Oh, yeah, great. We got these great samples. Yeah. How nice. Anyway, moving on to something a little bit more cheerful. Kind of cheerful, but kind of enraging as well. So this past weekend was Easter, and we saw two different responses to police heavy-handedness at people trying to celebrate their Christian faith. One from Canada, one from the UK. Interestingly enough, both of these churches are actually Polish. One is in, I think, Magda, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, South London, and the other one is in Calgary. Is that right? In Calgary. And actually, now that I say that, we've been to Calgary a few times. We like our people in Calgary. They've got a good fight in them, the ones in Calgary. So let's have a look first at the UK and how the UK responded when the police invaded the church at Easter.
Ladies and gentlemen, this gathering is unfortunately unlawful under the coronavirus regulations we have currently. You are not allowed to meet inside with this many people under law. At this moment in time, you need to go home. Failure to comply with this direction to leave and go to your home address ultimately could lead you to be fined £200, or if you fail to give your details, to you being arrested. I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, though it is Good Friday, and I appreciate you would like to worship, that this gathering is unlawful. So please, may you leave.
I think that's terrible.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, the priest obviously stood aside, let the police officer do his terrorizing and bullying. But what we did love was to find that a different Polish church, but this time again in Calgary, a very different response. Let's have a look at how the Polish church in Calgary responded to the heavy-handed law enforcement officers.
And the great thing is about this is if you're listening to it on the podcast app and you cannot see it visually, the cop is trying to speak. This woman cop is trying to talk to him, and he just is not.
He's not going to listen to her.
He's not going to listen to her. But also, she has no right to speak to him. Right? She's in his property without a warrant. So he's just saying, why would I listen to her? So she's just talking, doing her yapping,
and he doesn't let her speak.
You can't actually hear her. Which
it's
is
great. Let's have a listen to that, and let's have a look at that.
Please get out. Get out of this property. Immediately get out. Okay. Get out of this property immediately. Out. I don't want to hear anything. Out of this property immediately. I don't want to hear a word. Out. Out. Out of this property immediately until you come back with a warrant. Out. 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 Out of this property. Immediately out. Immediately go out and don't come back. I don't want to talk to you. Not a word. Out of this property. Immediately out. I don't care what you have to say. Out. Out. Out of this property, you Nazis. Out. Out. Gestapo is not allowed here. Immediately, Gestapo is not allowed. Out. Do you understand English? Get out of this property. Go. So go. Go. And don't come back without a warrant. Out, Nazi. Out. Out. You understand? Nazis are not welcome here. Out. And don't come back without a warrant. Do not come back without a warrant. You understand that? You're not welcome here. Nazis are not welcome here. Gestapo is not welcome here. Do not come back, you Nazi psychopaths. Unbelievable, sick, evil people. Intimidating people in a church during the Passover. Don't you dare coming back here.
Well, bravo for him. And as you know, Magda is from Poland. And as she said, Polish people have, unfortunately, a very clear memory of their ability to worship freely being infringed by communists, and this looks an awful lot like that.
Yes.
I mean,
it's unbelievable.
It's
six
unbelievable.
or eight cops, like so.
So we've a very to move away from sort of, as I say, from the sublime to the ridiculous. I like that. This is from the sublime to the ridiculous. Maybe.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
So So Irish jurisprudence.
I'm delighted Phelim is getting to tell this story. Actually, off you go there, Phelim.
So two mothers Two mothers.
Young.
Two Irish mothers.
Young Irish mothers.
When you think of immigration. So basically, two women went on a cosmetic surgery trip, an alleged cosmetic surgery trip, and we'll come back to that later, to Dubai. And Ireland has brought in a system where you come back and you are from certain countries, and it's very interesting. The countries are only countries, they were recommended, the scientists recommended all these countries all across the world, and they excluded countries that had significant Irish populations.
Go on.
So basically, science says you can't,
Well, they excluded Europe though, right?
No, some countries in Europe you have to quarantine.
Okay.
Yeah, like Austria that has no Irish people, right? So basically, yes, you have to quarantine as long as it doesn't obviously inconvenience Irish people wanting to return home. But they didn't include Dubai. Two women went for this plastic surgery trip. We can have a look at them now. Christine McGrath, 30, and Niamh Mulroney. And they didn't have the money, they said, to pay for the hotel. Like it's something like €2,000 each. And so they refused. And also they have children. And they wanted to get home to their children. And they said, we'll quarantine in the house. They were arrested and brought before the court over the Easter weekend and were granted quite onerous bail conditions. I think it's something like £2,000 or £3,000 each, but there had to be independent sureties. And in Ireland, you have to freeze somebody's bank account. The banks weren't open because it's a bank holiday weekend. So they were going to be held in prison until Tuesday. So it's kind of mad. It's mad, right? And I like, well, the line here I like is the state liaison officer at the airport, after explaining, I love that, the state liaison officer, it's like, sounds like a nice person. Yeah. Then when she explained it to them and they said no, then the state liaison officer called the cops and the cops came and arrested them.
State liaison officer?
Yeah, so, and dressed in pink runners, pink leggings and a beige tracksuit top, Christy McGrath appeared first behind a Perspex enclosed dock. I mean, they were obviously very upset.
The women.
And another,
very upsetting.
So when they went to Dubai for their boob jobs.
Oh, he's now dropping in the fact that it was a boob job.
Well, they went there for the boob jobs, but when they were there, they didn't have them.
They didn't have the boob jobs when they went there. Now,
yes.
There's been a pattern of this kind of behaviour in Ireland. So people in Ireland...
Can we just say we're not accusing them of any kind of deception?
Not at all. But there has been a tendency in Ireland for people who are dying to get out of Ireland and go somewhere and see a bit of sunshine.
And do a bit of shopping.
That they arrive at the airport and people say to them, the police say to them, where will you be off to now? And they say, you know what, I'm going to Tenerife for a dental appointment.
Yes.
Or, you know what, I'm going to Malaga
for a medical appointment. I'm going to Dubai and here's my hospital appointment. And
then you arrive there in Tenerife or Malaga.
Cancel.
And you cancel the appointment and have said holiday that you would not otherwise be allowed.
That's allegations.
That's an allegation.
And it's got so bad that Tenerife dentists are now refusing to accept appointments from Irish people. Well, you don't know that?
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, they've refused to accept.
That's classic.
Actually, I was thinking, but they should accept the appointments
and say you have to pay in advance.
Pay €150 deposit.
That'd be a nice little earner.
Yeah,
very nice.
So, but anyway, so these women went to Dubai for these boob jobs, and they didn't have them.
Didn't have the boob jobs.
And then they came home, but they arrived at the airport, and they were not allowed to board the flight until they handed over their credit card details, and to pay for the hotel quarantine that was ahead of them. And they said they had no money to do that. They weren't allowed to board the flight. They then said they spent the next 2 days roaming the airport.
Looking for money?
No, they
were at the airport in Dubai for 2 days before they got on the plane. So hang on, how did they get on the plane?
Their father, Eddie Freeman, Miss Mulroney's father, Eddie Freeman, basically phoned everybody he knew, his TD, his MP, his RSVP, the Department of Foreign Affairs, RUC, IRSP, whatever it is. He phoned them all. Anyway, got them home, and on the understanding that they would go into quarantine, and they got back and they said, no, we're not going in. And so they were arrested and held and imprisoned in a prison for... And they said, well, we're going to go home and quarantine. And they've had 3, in the short time they were away, they had 3 COVID tests, all were negative. Now, if you're tested positive for COVID in Ireland, you just quarantine at home. But if you fly in with a negative test, you have to spend 2 weeks in a hotel. And the hotel is hell. The hotel is you're not allowed out of the hotel room except 1 hour once a day, where you're accompanied by a member of staff.
They have actually, which is very Irish, by the way, to me. They even have parts of the rules that you're allowed out once a day to smoke, because obviously that's a human right, and it'd be terrible to be deprived of your ability to smoke and all that.
So Ireland off the welcomes, I'll tell you. Yeah, you can come to Ireland, but we're going to charge you €2,000 to stay in a crappy hotel, and if you don't want to do that, you're going to be arrested.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Okay, we're coming to the end of the program, and the last thing we have to share with you, which was really fabulous, is this really, really fabulous recipe from the New York Times called chocolate lava cake. And honestly, the New York Times aren't good for much, but I'll tell you one thing, every now and again they surprise, and this is a really great recipe. But the thing that I just love about the New York Times, so we have a subscription to the New York Times, so you don't have to read it. The thing that I just adore, though, is the comments section. So for example, this particular recipe was liked by like 7,000 people, but the comments, there's 333 comments, and the comments are great. So this recipe is made in a ramekin. Now, the New York Times recommend you make it in a 10-inch ramekin. We decided to make it in 2 smaller ramekins, which I would recommend actually in terms of cooking. Anyway, we did it in two ramekins. But here's what happened then in the comments section of the New York Times.
Let's do the recipe first. No.
Well, I was going to tell people about the comments, because I thought the comments were so nice. So basically, this was 2 years ago, a woman called Ali. So good. I'm 25. I don't own ramekins. Muffin tins worked fine. Made 4. Next person, Ellen. You can do one of these and I'll do the other.
I'm 86. What is a ramekin?
Pat, it's illegal in most states to own a ramekin if you're under the age of 30. Bella.
I'm 55. Had ramekins. Had teens too. Teens broke ramekins. Used Pyrex cups. Tremendous.
MRR. I have ramekins and kept them. I guess they sparked joy.
Oh, that's that.
Nancy.
Nancy, I'm 65. Realised that the dish I was using for our dog's water was in actuality a ramekin.
I'm 60. Had ramekins, no joy. Gave them to Goodwill, missed ramekins, creme brulee, so bought more. Found the box that never made it to Goodwill. Felt bad for having a ridiculous number of ramekins. No joy. Made this recipe. The joy is back. I'm 63. Own ramekins. Bought them on the sly many years ago. I was young then. I'm older now. I kept them off scene, hidden away. Why? My husband, 67, believes they take up an obscene amount of precious storage space. He did buy crumpet rings, however, at the start of the pandemic. I will make lava cake. I will demonstrate the redeeming qualities of ramekins. I will fantasize about replacing crumpet rings with ramekins in the coveted drawer.
Kevin, I'm 37 and recently acquired ramekins. To be fair to other posters, I live in Canada where mid-30s ramekin acquisition is compulsory, both socially and legally. The results of this recipe were excellent. So the world can really be divided into
people who have ramekins. And by the way, we have ramekins. And not alone do we have ramekins, we have several sizes of ramekins. But can I just say...
And we have lucrative ramekins.
And in fact, we made this lava cake in the ramekins. And it was said husband's birthday this past weekend, 54.
Oh.
I think that's fair.
Shots fired. 10:47.
Well, here's what I would say to that, by the way.
Pursuits underway.
Here's the one thing I would say to that.
Civilian in need of
the one thing I would say
assistance.
To that. The one thing I would say to that is that this
wounded civilian
said husband. I would say the one thing I would say to that is that his wife would love to be 54. That's all I will say to that.
Well, you don't get points for insulting someone. By then sort of self-deprecating yourself.
We're all about truth here, Philip. Okay, so for this beautiful recipe,
That's my truth. That's my truth.
His truth. You got to preheat the oven to 425, which is a little tricky, and Phelim is going to get into a whole stink now about the fact that I was impatient and wouldn't wait for the oven to heat up. 425 is a big heat, by the way.
It's a lot of heat now.
Okay, then next thing you do is melt the chocolate. Melt 3.5 ounces of chocolate, which is like one of these bars, but it has to have at least 70% cocoa in it, right? And just what I would do is, so you're going to melt the chocolate with 3 tablespoons of butter. And I do that, actually do it in the microwave and just do it in 30 seconds. Do it very carefully because you don't want it to cook. You just want it to melt. And I would take it out after 30 seconds, in and out after 30 seconds until it gets down.
I would do it in 20 seconds. I did it and a minute and a half is too much. You could end up with boiled butter. basically.
Okay, so just be
out
careful.
there.
Be careful. Just keep opening the microwave. A lot of people, by the way, can do this over a bain-marie. I think it's too much trouble, which means a pot of boiling water, basically, and you put another pot on top of it. Too much mess. Anyway, get a second bowl. In the second bowl, you can see us doing that now here. Add 3 tablespoons of sugar, 1 egg yolk, vanilla, 1/8 of a spoon of salt. And then whisk violently. Whisk violently. And what's very useful then was to have said husband, whose birthday it was this past weekend, he's 54, and whisk that violently until it becomes smooth and thick and foamy. And then add in 2 tablespoons of flour and whisk until smooth.
You didn't say
and then,
1/8 of what salt? 1/8 of a
of a teaspoon. 1/8 of a teaspoon, very little salt. Then get your ramekins, said ramekins from the earlier conversation, and then butter them and give them a dusting of sugar. So throw in some sugar and just dust it around. And then, you want to add the chocolate mixture to the egg mixture. Gently combine, you can see it's gently combined. Then pour them into the 2 ramekins. Then get them in the oven. Don't put them on a baking sheet, put them directly onto the oven. You see the way I did it, so that they get an air underneath and everything like that. And then we're going to cook these for about 10, 12, depending on your oven, as I always say, but keep a good eye on them. Then, and this is where you start praying, you take them out and you put
make sure the top is hard, right? It has to be
not
hard. But not overcooked.
I wouldn't say hard, I would say set. Set, but not hard.
Don't overbake.
Then you don't want to overbake, because then but by the way, no matter what happens, this is going to be delicious anyway. Then you invert the plate, and as you're inverting the plate, you say quick Hail Mary. And
don't forget to scrape right with a sharp knife.
You should. That's right. Release the cake with a sharp knife around the edges. Then turn it over. I see a cat coming in there, Philip. Turn it over. Oh yes! And you're going to eat this immediately with joy.
Lots of joy. And cream and ice cream.
And cream and
joy
ice cream.
And cream and ice cream.
And by the way, you could do this on your own. You could do it with a friend. But by the way, very delightful on your own as well, by the way. We did it because the birthday boy. So look at us delighting in that. And I can actually say this is a great, great recipe. And really, and don't worry, if your lava cake collapses, yummy, 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 eat it anyway. But obviously, if you're trying to show off to the people that are...
Now we have a cat.
Now we have a cat who's got a plan on tossing a cat. He doesn't have... No, he's all very gentle. That's us for this week.
Hold on, let's bring the cat over and say...
Have the cat say hello then.
Okay, everyone needs to go on YouTube now and look at the cat.
Look at the cat. Look at Mr.
That's
Top
Cat.
A little bit overweight. We're not going to talk about that now.
Was he alarmed by the earthquake the other night?
Oh, we had an earthquake the other night. Very alarming, by the way.
We went out 4 o'clock in the morning.
We went out in the middle of the street. We could see the neighbours putting down their shades. We thought, actually, that's a good idea. Because in case the glass would break, you don't want the glass to break.
So it was weird. We had the aftershock. We had a foreshock.
We had a foreshock and then an aftershock.
That woke us up, and then the really big one half an hour later.
Well, it was a 4 on the Richter scale, but it was 10 miles from here, so we did feel it.
Yes.
Anyway, this is enough for this week. Don't forget, please, give what you can to mysonhunter.com, and...
Let's get the truth out there. Let's stop the cover-up. It's important.
Bye. Thank you.